What is up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? I am back and bringing you guys a brand new movie review, and this is going to be for Godzilla King of the Monsters. So if you see an image of Godzilla King of the Monsters in the background of my shot, then that is the movie that we were talking about. This movie stars Kyle Chandler as Mark Russell. You got Millie Bobby Brown as Madison Russell, as well as Ken Watanabe. He plays Ashiro Serizawa, which Serizawa is pretty much a reference to the original Serizawa from the 1954 film. This is pretty much the best adaptation of a Godzilla movie that we've had. I know a lot of people give it crap on the internet for being too focused on Godzilla and not enough on the human drama, but we really got that with Gareth Edwards' directorial debut with the 2014 Godzilla movie. I think that Michael Dougherty's version of King of the Monsters is actually 10 times better because it focuses more on the monsters and sort of their lore and legend, as opposed to the Gareth Edwards movie, which was more or less a disaster movie with Godzilla being sort of the monster that's causing these natural disasters, which I didn't mind. I actually really loved that movie, but I love these two movies for different reasons, and I think this is the more faithful adaptation to those Toho Godzilla movies than the original Godzilla 2014 that we got a long time ago. This movie also stars O'Shea Jackson as one of the main characters that is a Marine in this movie, and all these actors do a really fine job in this movie, like all the human elements to it, where you kind of got these scientists that are trying to study Godzilla as well as use him as sort of a way to bring balance to the titans that are rising from this hollow earth theory. It's really cool. You've also got the military element who is trying to study as well and destroy Godzilla because they view Godzilla as a threat, along with all these monsters that are coming out of the ground. They bring back several of the monsters from the original Toho Godzilla movies, as well as King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan. It's really cool to kind of see the designs of these creatures and how they kind of updated them for a modern audience. Especially me being a Godzilla fan and loving these movies ever since I was a kid, I always loved when they kind of mash these monster movies together and kind of had them fight similar to an Avengers style movie. This movie is no exception. You know, you have the military who's trying to destroy them with an oxygen destroyer weapon, similar to that of the ending of the 1954 film, where Serizawa creates this oxygen destroyer weapon and tries to kill Godzilla with it, and is successful in the 1954 movie, whereas in this movie the military is not as successful, and this only weakens Godzilla a little bit, but then they end up using the oxygen destroyer weapon when they kind of find Godzilla's hideout in sort of an Atlantis style sort of ancient city that kind of worships these monsters as sort of titans or god. And then Serizawa goes in to, spoiler alert, kill himself when he takes these oxygen destroyer weapons and actually uses it to pretty much give Godzilla more power. That's where you see sort of the end sequence where Godzilla is fighting King Ghidorah, and he pretty much is, you know, a nuclear weapon, and you see sort of the buildings and the cranes and stuff kind of melt away as he's kind of walking by, and, you know, it's pretty much an atomic bomb where he kind of just destroys himself at the end of the film. This movie starts off where you see Mark Russell's character, his son is pretty much killed by Godzilla in the San Francisco attack, pretty much where the military and all the people from the first film are leaping out of the AC-130, and you see Aaron Taylor Johnson's character kind of gliding through sort of the Godzilla attack with the Mutos, and that's where this movie pretty much starts. And you see that in the background, then you see Godzilla come into frame, and you presume that his son is pretty much dead because he's kind of screaming for him and he's nowhere to be found. You know, Kyle Chandler's character, who I think is a really great actor and who kind of worked with monster movies before and sort of Peter Jackson's King Kong version, it's kind of interesting to see him come back for this movie, and for the fact that, you know, he is playing a father figure and stuff like that, and not sort of an actor who's trying to get his claim to fame like he was in Peter Jackson's King Kong. He even references Kong when they're sort of in one of the military jets, and they're kind of going over the different, you know, monsters that are pretty much going out to attack the city. And you later learn that Emma, his ex-wife's character, is pretty much on the opposite side of Monarch, where they're a different organization that's pretty much bringing about the destruction or the apocalypse with these monsters and trying to rebuild society from that. They think that when they're doing this, they're going to help the environment and help pretty much the planet by pretty much destroying it and then bringing it up anew with these creatures, whereas Monarch is trying to live in harmony with these creatures and, you know, study them, and Godzilla is pretty much there to kind of bring about the balance between the titans and stuff. And these titans are Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah is this sort of alien-like life form, which they kind of hint at in this movie, where his ability, like, even if Godzilla cuts off one of his limbs, he can kind of regrow it, and he has pretty much lightning that kind of shoots out from his wings and stuff, and even his mouth on occasion. You know, he has pretty much the fire breath capabilities of Godzilla, but with the added benefit of flight. And King Ghidorah is a staple within the Godzilla franchise, always being sort of Godzilla's arch nemesis within those films. And there's a lot of really cool, impressive fight sequences that takes place within this movie, such as the opening sequence where you see Godzilla. He is fighting in sort of these ice sheets in Antarctica, and you have Godzilla and King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah is pretty much awakened from Monarch, and then Godzilla follows him, and they pretty much have this first battle sequence, which is pretty much like a wrestling match throwdown, where Godzilla is like using all these wrestling style moves in order to try and decapitate one of the King Ghidorah heads. You see at the end of this movie that there's another fight sequence when Godzilla has pretty much become an atomic weapon after being attacked with an oxygen destroyer while fighting King Ghidorah. They think that by using this oxygen destroyer weapon that maybe they might be able to destroy Godzilla, and in the process calm the monsters that are pretty much attacking the world. You know, this movie is a globe-trotting film, and I really do like movies that take place in multiple different environments, just because it gives you a chance to see sort of new different cultures and stuff like that that you wouldn't be able to in sort of any other setting. And that's why one of the reasons I like Assassin's Creed so much is because that video game takes place among different time periods as well as different locations around the globe. And even in this movie, you kind of do a little bit of globe trotting where you go through Mexico to Europe to America, and you see sort of all these cool, unique locations. I really think that the globe trotting element really does bring sort of an international sense to Godzilla, and there's even sort of a UN style meeting where they kind of have it to find sort of what they're supposed to be doing with Godzilla. Serizawa is there as well as Stans, who returns, which I really like Stans's character in the first movie where he's kind of this military leader that's trying to destroy Godzilla so he could hopefully, calm the Mutos, which is what they're definitely doing in the sequel film. The military is constantly working with Monarch, but they're also kind of, judgmental and skeptical of Monarch sort of, tactics and sort of dealing with these creatures. Monarch pretty much wants to study these creatures and keep them alive, whereas the military pretty much wants to hunt them down and kill them all. And you definitely get that feeling, especially in the Antarctica scene where you see, these Marines come out of the ospreys and stuff, and they're immediately just killed by King Ghidorah and some of the other monsters. The action sequences are just crazy. There's this big, huge fight sequence between King Ghidorah and Godzilla towards the end of the film where Madison kind of escapes after hearing her mom's plans for how they're going to take over the world. She steals the orca from the beginning of the movie, which conjures up Mothra and some of the other extinct sort of monsters and stuff, and she goes to a Red Sox stadium of all places, and there's this big giant fight sequence where King Ghidorah kind of comes towards her, and you see sort of the smoke billowing like from trailer and stuff, and it kind of crashes into the stadium, and then you kind of get King Ghidorah's reveal, and then after that you see sort of Godzilla come from the ocean. She kind of does in sort of the 1954 Japanese movies. He's always seen coming from the oceans or appearing out of the cities and stuff like that, and throughout this movie you kind of get the whole Godzilla Toho music, which I think is pretty cool that they kind of bring back sort of the music from the Godzilla films into this. Like it really is a modern day take on the movies, and hearing the updated score from the Godzilla theme is pretty cool, especially when it's playing in the theaters. And there's that scene where after the sort of the whole oxygen destroyer thing where Serizawa pretty much, spoiler alert, sacrifices himself to sort of save Kyle Chandler's crew in this movie. Godzilla rises from the ocean, he kind of sniffs out the people on the nuclear sub, and you hear the Godzilla theme song play for the first time, and it's like, holy shit, like they actually brought back the sort of Godzilla theme song from the original 1954 film, and that really brought back some really cool memories because I used to love hearing that theme song whenever it appeared, and like you kind of knew that shit was going to go down between Godzilla and the other monsters. And there's a really cool action sequence between Godzilla and Mothra where they're fighting King Ghidorah at the end. Rodan kind of sweeps in to try and defend King Ghidorah, but Mothra kind of sacrifices herself as well, pretty much impales Rodan while also getting killed. And it's sort of a heartbreaking scene because throughout this sort of movie they portray sort of Mothra and Godzilla's relationship as Mothra being sort of Mother Earth style figure in this movie. There's constant references to the Bible in this movie and the Book of Revelations, especially with King Ghidorah kind of being this massive sort of apocalyptic bringer of death where he's constantly bringing storms and stuff to Godzilla, and he is pretty much like an alien creature that can kind of regrow its heads and stuff even after being killed. You see part of that in this movie where Godzilla tries to eat the King Ghidorah head in the movie and eventually does by using its fire breath. And then you get those sort of scenes where there's a gigantic volcano that's erupting, and Rodan sort of comes out in the beginning from one of these extinct volcanoes that is now starting to erupt again, or dormant volcanoes and stuff like that. And then you get that really cool shot where you see sort of the cross in sort of the foreground, and then you see sort of King Ghidorah and Rodan is pretty much worshiping King Ghidorah in the background, and that's a really cool seminal shot. And there's also that sequence of the movie where you see the research aircraft that looks kind of like a UFO or a flying saucer or sort of a B-2 stealth bomber, and it's heading towards a gigantic lightning storm and rainstorm, and you see King Ghidorah kind of coming out of that, and like all the lightning and stuff kind of flashing across the screen. Those are some really pivotal moments that kind of harken back to sort of, biblical sort of prophecy. There's that epic sweeping shot where you see all the monsters kind of coming together and attacking the city. You've got, anti-aircraft fire kind of going towards, the different monsters and stuff, and you see them kind of wreaking havoc upon the city that they're attacking in this film. And it's a really beautiful shot, and it's like one of those shots that you can kind of use as sort of a screensaver or a wallpaper on your computer or desktop or whatever you have. None of these shots from these movies ever get old. Like I can still watch this movie, and while some of the dialogue is rather cheesy, while some of it is kind of not taken as seriously by one of the scientists in this movie, the rest of the actors, they do a really good job. And I think that nobody in this movie kind of has a role that they feel like where their role doesn't matter within this film. Like everybody has a part to play in this. You kind of see sort of the family dynamic come back together again towards the end of this film, where Emma kind of saves Madison, Kyle Chandler's character, and she kind of brings a Humvee that was part of the other, sort of research team that is trying to bring about the destruction of humankind, going there to rescue Madison because she's like, I've already lost a child, I'm not going to lose another one again. And she goes there to save them, and you get that funny sequence when they're kind of leaving the Red Sox stadium as Godzilla and King Ghidorah are kind of fighting in the background, and O'Shea Jackson and sort of the two family members are kind of fighting. He's like, yeah, if my parents were your parents, I'd probably run away from home too. And they kind of stop the Humvee, and they're like, what? And he's like, yeah, if my parents were your parents, I'd probably run away from home too. And that's where they find Madison. She's kind of running back home after sort of realizing what she's done by bringing all these creatures together, and they kind of find her in a bathroom tub as she's kind of hiding from the destruction that's going on throughout this movie. You know, that's where you kind of see the family reunite again, where eventually then, spoiler alert, Emma's character eventually ends up dying as she sacrifices herself with the orca to kind of save her family, which is kind of a way to kind of bring sort of the story full circle, whereas Emma and Madison were kind of bringing together the monsters with the orca in the first part of this film with, you know, Mothra in the beginning and then King Ghidorah. Now she's pretty much being destroyed by it, and also that her character is kind of portrayed as the evil person in the beginning of the film, where she's kind of bringing apart the destruction of humankind, and now she's pretty much saving it and being sort of the mother figure that she should have been within the first part of this film. You know, Madison having sort of a split family is kind of heartbroken throughout most of this movie because, you know, she wants to be with her dad and wants to have her mom, and sort of like any divorced family, she kind of wants their family to kind of have sort of that relationship again and stuff, and she kind of misses times that they had with her family. But, you know, obviously these creatures kind of come to life, and that kind of changes her trajectory of where she wants to be in the future. And I really do like Millie Bobby Brown as an actress. I think as an actress she's really cool, and, you know, her roles in Stranger Things are really good, and Kyle Chandler also. All these actors, even Ken Watanabe, have a really prominent role in this movie, and it's really cool to see sort of Ken Watanabe and Serizawa's relationship with Godzilla towards the end of this movie, where Serizawa puts his hand on Godzilla as he's pretty much lying dormant and trying to regain his sort of power, and then they kind of blow him up with the oxygen, destroy a weapon to kind of bring him back to life. And you kind of see that moment where he's like, you know, goodbye old friend, which was a really heartwarming moment between Serizawa and Godzilla. I really like Ken Watanabe and everything that he does. He's a really fantastic actor, and like I said before, none of these actors really had any sort of bad moments in this film. I think there's lines in this movie that are really good that you can kind of quote pretty much in any sort of situation. Like I said before in many reviews, that the mark of a really good movie is one where you have these really cool one-liners within this really cool story, like Godzilla King of the Monsters, that you can kind of quote from time to time. It's one of those movies where if you don't really think about it hard enough, you're going to really enjoy this movie. You're going to really have a really fun time, especially if you're a Godzilla fan like myself. You're going to enjoy sort of the special effects, some of the stuff that you can't really do without using CGI, and I kind of don't fault them for that. I like the use between CGI and sort of real practical effects and sort of stages and stuff like that, which they definitely have in this movie. They combine, you know, green screen sound stages, and then they combine the monsters and stuff in the background and some of these shots and stuff, and it all kind of blends together, and that's all thanks to Michael Dougherty. He really had a really keen eye of what he wanted to do with this Godzilla film, being a fan of Godzilla himself, which I kind of enjoy when a movie studio can bring somebody aboard to direct these movies that are really big fans of Godzilla and respect the lore and respect sort of where these creatures and where sort of this story should go. Because while I did like Gareth Edwards, I don't think he was as much of a Godzilla fan as Michael Dougherty was, and while he did say that he was a fan of Godzilla as a kid, like everybody, even like movie directors, have sort of their own sort of ideas where a Godzilla movie should be, and that's why for me, being a huge fan of these creatures, I like how they respect the lore and respect the Toho versions, because the original Godzilla, Roland Emmerich, didn't do that, even though I did enjoy that as a kid. Nowadays, when I look back on it, I do see that movie as sort of flawed and had some issues with it, but this movie is really different in terms that it's giving you more of what you want, which is Godzilla fighting these creatures in really cool and awesome ways. There's a lot of city battles, there's a lot of places that are unique to Godzilla that they go to, and like I said, I really do like the globetrotting aspects to it, the score, bringing back some of the original monster music to this film and using sort of real life creature effects and sounds to the sound design and stuff like that is really great as well. There's not enough good things I could say about this movie. I just think you guys should definitely go see it if you haven't seen it yet. Some of you who are Godzilla fans will definitely enjoy it. I know people that want sort of an art house style film will definitely probably be disappointed. You'll probably nitpick things, but as a Godzilla fan, I think this movie definitely deserves an A rating. It's definitely up there with the first Godzilla movie, which I think I gave a really good score as well, and I still watch those movies to this day. Like, this is one of my most repeat watch movies, especially, you know, with the Gareth Edwards movie. So Michael Dougherty, you did a really good job. Hats off to cast and crew, just because I think that you guys did an exceptional job. So that is my review of Godzilla King of the Monsters. Hopefully you guys like this review, and as always guys, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.